Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Frosty. Today we're going to do a wheel bearing or hub bearing replacement. Alright, first thing you want to do is get a jack and lift up your car. If you don't have an impact wrench, crack your lug nuts loose before you lift up your car, otherwise you're just going to spin your tire. You're going to want to break this loose. This is a 32 millimeter. I have 32 millimeter here. What I like to do is pull the caliper off, but I like to pull the whole bracket off. I want to take off the bolt that's right here. That's a 17. Then back under here, there's your other 17 millimeter. Your open-ended wrench. Let's put that on the bolt. Crack that loose. And then I'm going to switch to a 17 millimeter socket. These sometimes are really tight. Break that loose. I'm going to switch to a Milwaukee ratchet. And we've got both our bolts out. Grab yourself a piece of wood. Take your rotor and your caliper off. You have something to sit on it so that you don't stretch your line. Have that tucked out of the way. You can see our wheel bearing right here. We'll be taking the wheel bearing out. Then you can see your axle shaft. We'll be taking this out. But to get either of those items out, you have to take apart these bolts. This top one is on a cam bolt, and that adjusts your camber in and out. So make sure you mark with a paint pen or something where your bolts are so you can get alignment back where it was prior to taking it apart. Grab yourself two 19 millimeters, and then you're going to also want to grab a 12 millimeter because we're going to want to take these lines loose. Pop that line loose. Come over to the other side. Take that one out. This is your ABS line. These nuts are going to be really tight, so make sure you use like a breaker bar and impact. Pull these bolts out. This top bolt does have a cam, so I don't know if you can see it in the video, but it actually moves the top of your knuckle forwards and backwards while you turn that, and that's how you adjust your camber on these cars. Put your wrench on there and just give it a good wiggle and push on it from the other side, and it should come right out. Here's that cam bolt that goes on the top. You can see, depending where you turn it, you have a different ramp on your cam. Alright, next step is just to lean this knuckle forwards with your strut out of the way, and then you can actually push your axle shaft straight through, and you can just pull this back far enough and you'll actually be able to slide it right out of that unit bearing. Let's move it from the other side here. There you go. You get your axle shaft free from your knuckle. Or once you got the axle shaft out, we can go ahead and pull our unit bearing out, which is this. It's held in by 4 bolts on the back side. On this car, 14 millimeter, I like to take just an impact and kind of squeeze it in there and just run them out. Just get on one, give her the beans, and they come out. Grab one of the bolts for your strut. I put the strut back together with one bolt. Alright, so just get one in there. Get your other one started. You don't even have to put it all the way through, just so it can't move. And now we can pull this out real easy. But if you don't have a slide hammer, a regular hammer usually will do it too. Just kind of start giving some little love taps to it. If you live in a real salty environment, these can be a real bugger to get off. An air hammer or a slide hammer might work better for you. This wheel bearing is starting to leak. It's real wet around the seal here, the dust shield, so we're going to replace this unit bearing. At this point, just make sure that the inside bore is nice and clean so that your new bearing will go right back in. Put anti-seize on it if you want. Make sure your new one is just like your old one. This is a Moog. Part number is 513220. This is an 05 Outback. I'm sure a lot of Subarus use the same wheel bearing. Put your dust shield back up first. This cutout is for your caliper, so that goes towards the back. Get your bolt holes lined up. Go ahead and put your bolts back in. I got my 4 bolts started from behind. I'm going to take the strut bolts back out, and I'm going to take those back out so I can move the knuckle around and then get back to those bolts of the impact and just run them home. I like to get all 4 of these kind of drawn all the way in before I really give them the beans. You don't want your unit bearing to sit in crooked. Alright, those 4 are all tight. Alright, your unit bearing is successfully installed. Now you just have to put it all back together, put your axle shaft back through, and then make sure you put a little anti-seize or grease on these splines so they don't seize. If you ever have to take this apart again, you want this to slide in and out of the splined shaft in your unit bearing, so make sure that it doesn't get frozen up in there. And make sure that this is seated all the way in the transmission, and they do have some wiggle room like this. And now you just have to kind of squeeze it back in. Move your strut out of the way. Tilt your knuckle back up. Turn the unit bearing a little bit, that helps it line up. Okay, you can hear that bottom out. Grab your nut, spin it onto the end of your axle shaft. Grab your bolts. On this car, the lower bolt is the one that does not have the cam, so do that one first. We'll get this last bolt slid through. Don't pinch your fingers like I did. We'll get all of our hardware put back on. In this car, only the top bolt had a washer and then a nut. The bottom bolt just has a nut. Just go ahead and tighten those 2 down and make sure you have your cam bolt where you want. I've got my strut bolts tightened back up. Last things I really need to do is hook my ABS line back up, and then my brake line over here goes right back here. Now I'm just going to slide the caliper and rotor back over the face of the new unit bearing. Take your bolts, and these should be the 17 millimeters, and just put your bracket bolts back in. The last thing you need to do is torque this down. Now, this car is a 2005 Subaru. If you're watching this just how to replace a wheel bearing, make sure you look up the torque spec on this. They're usually around 130 to 170 foot-pounds. So check your car, don't go off what I'm doing. Alright, I am ready to get this torqued. This is a 32 millimeter. I looked up torque spec for my car, 05 Subaru Outback. It's 162 foot-pounds. If you have slotted rotors like this does, just take a screwdriver, stick it down in there so that it hits this. Now when you go to tighten this, it can't spin. That's 162. Give her a couple clicks. And that is actually a pretty important torque spec because it puts the preload on your bearing. If you get it way too tight, it's going to kill your bearing. If you get it way too loose, it's going to kill your bearing. So make sure you look up the torque spec on that nut. And the last thing that we need to do, I've used this nut twice. You should really always use a new nut, but you take a hammer and a punch and you peen this in to knock into the keyway so that it can't come loose. And you can see how I kind of mushroom that down in there so that nut will not be backing off. Last up is recover your screwdriver. Put your wheel back on. This is a Subaru, takes 90 foot-pounds on each lug nut. All right, we'll grab our wheel, throw her back up in there. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more how-to videos and projects. And then we'll torque these down to 90 foot-pounds. Make sure you set your car back down so your tire doesn't turn. That's it, guys. Successful repair. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.